Hello everybody, thank you very much for watching this live stream. I'm Mr. Matt and this is Dr. Tot Cookie. Very good. And welcome to SAT, ACT Prep. Today we're going to work on some miscellaneous writing skills problems, focusing in on subject-verb agreement, pronoun usage, as well as selecting the correct verb tense, as well as punctuating with semicolons and colons. So we're going to go through these in some clusters, pairs of questions at a time, and there'll be some repetitious presentation of subtopics so you get some good exposure to all of them. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. As a reminder, these are live sessions, so there's a little bit of a delay with the iPad, but I'll try and mitigate that as much as possible. If you have any questions at any point, then please let me know. You can either post them in the live chat section, or you can post them in the comment section below. I'm also available on all of my social media accounts that are listed in the description, so feel free to add and follow me on all of those. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get started. So as I said, we're going to go through these questions in pairs. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. After about 1 minute, I'll start to give you some hints, first by identifying the question type, what it's testing, and then giving you 1 or 2 more hints before showing you the solution. After the 3 minutes, we'll go through a full explanation. And again, if there's anything that you see that you want more examples of, feel free to let me know. I'll keep track of the time in the upper left-hand corner, and I'll try to update it per minute as best as I can. Okay, so for number 1, Jupiter or its moons has been visible in the night sky for the last few days. Is it no change? Should we change has to is, are, or have? So here, when you are separating combining two nouns using the conjunction or, this would also be true with the correlatives either or neither nor. Whenever you're combining nouns with the conjunction or, then you need to make sure that the verb takes the form of the most proximate noun. That's not true with and, but or means this one or that one. It's optional, right? Or it's conditional on just one out of a possible two options. So that indicates that the subject, even though it's more than one option available or more than one option that's presented, the conjunction indicates that only one of those nouns will ultimately be selected or valid or be true. So the subject has to be singular if both of the subjects are singular. Here, the subject that's closest to the verb has been, and that's a conditional past tense verbal phrase, is moons. So we have Jupiter, which is singular, but then we have the subject, the noun rather, moons, which is plural. So we need the verb to match up with the noun moons, which would be have. Now, it turns out that number 2 has the same answer, but it has the same answer for a different reason. Number 2 is Jupiter and its moons has been visible in the night sky for the past few days. So now, even if we just said, for example, that Jupiter and its moon, let's just say Jupiter had one moon, if in that case, then it would be correct as it's written, and it would be no change because, because for number 2, if it was written that way, because we're using the conjunction and will require plural verbs. So number 2 would be plural no matter what, even if both of the nouns were singular themselves. Jupiter and its moon have been visible in the night sky. But if we use the conjunction or, then we would need a singular noun, because or we have to look at the noun that's closest to the verb. So if we just had the singular noun moon rather than moons in number 1, then it would be correct as it's written. Jupiter or its moon has been visible in the night sky for the past few days. But here it says for number 1, moons, plural, not moons, singular, so we have to change that to have. For number 2, they're using the conjunction and, as well as the fact that moons is plural, so it kind of is a moot point. But regardless, if we use the conjunction and, we have to use a plural verb. So this answer to number 2 was D. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at 3 and 4. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, and after 1 minute, I'll start to give you some hints. Okay, so number 3 and number 4 are both involve parenthetical phrases. Parenthetical phrases are insertions of extra information that writers can use to provide more detail and to also vary the sentence structure and to make the reading to make the sentence structure more dynamic and interesting. So in number 3, the movie star, comma, followed by a group of reporters, comma, always arrive late. So we're checking the verb tense, the form, the subject-verb agreement of the verb arrive to the subject of the sentence. So we need to correctly identify the subject here. The parenthetical phrase followed by a group of reporters is non-essential information. So when you're checking the grammar here, you want to remove the parenthetical phrase and make sure that the sentence is cogent without it. So without the phrase, it would be the movie star always arrive late. So if the subject here is movie star, which I'll underline in red, that's singular. So if we have a singular subject, we need a singular verb. Now, there's a lot of exceptions in English, which makes English learning English, especially as an adult, pretty complex and can be a little bit daunting because there's so many irregularities. In general, though, I'll give you this rule that nouns tend to go with common sense, where verbs can be kind of tricky. So nouns, you can usually clearly identify. Now, again, there's a lot of exceptions here, but usually you can identify a singular versus a plural noun by looking as to whether it ends in S. If it doesn't end in S, it usually is singular. If it does end in S, it usually is plural. Verbs tend to be, now again, there's a lot of exceptions, there's a lot of irregular verbs in English, however, they tend to be opposite that. So usually, a lot of times, when verbs end in S, they're actually singular. When they do not end in S, they're usually plural, as is the case here. The movie star always arrive late. We could say the movie stars always arrive late because arrive is a plural verb. But here the subject is movie star, singular, so we need arrives that ends in an S. So notice that verbs are kind of opposite what you would normally expect. So verbs are tricky, they're opposite common sense. Nouns usually go with common sense. But again, there's a lot of exceptions there. If you look, for example, at the noun person, there's one person, but there's 3 people, right? People is an irregular plural noun. It doesn't end in S. So you have to sometimes think about exceptions and make sure that you consider all of them. But generally, nouns go with common sense. Singular nouns don't end in S. Plural nouns do end in S, and verbs are opposite that. For number 4, we spent most days, dash, notwithstanding the last day, comma, of our vacation swimming in the ocean. So notwithstanding the last day, so that means not including the last day or with the exception of the last day. That's a parenthetical phrase. That's extra information. It's non-essential to the meaning of the sentence. And so we need to punctuate it either with 2 commas or 2 dashes. This is a really common SAT and ACT punctuation question. It's always going to be inappropriate to use some combination of a dash and a comma on opposite ends of a parenthetical phrase or clause. So here, the only correct combination where it's either comma, comma, or dash, dash, and it definitely can't be B because it does need to be punctuated. It's a parenthetical. So the answer for number 4 was D, that used 2 dashes. C, notice, is just the opposite of how it's originally stated. It's originally punctuated dash and then comma, and C just reverses that order, which is equally incorrect. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at questions 5 and 6. So I'll give you 3 minutes. After about 1 minute, I'll give you some hints. Actually, let me. Okay, so for 5 and 6, these are primarily concerning the rules of colons and semicolons when punctuating. So number 5, he has only one goal: to finish his report on time. Now here, this is actually the more advanced usage rule for colons. Colons can be used either to introduce a list, but never after a verb or a preposition, or they can be used to separate two clauses when the second clause explains or expands upon the first. Or in other words, oftentimes the second clause will answer an implied question asked or posed in the first clause. So, and that's what's happening here in number 5. So when you hear the first clause, he has only one goal. What do you think to yourself? You think, what is his goal, right? The second clause, to finish, which is to finish his report on time, the second clause is answering an implied question posed by the first clause. That's an ideal situation for the more advanced usage of the colon. Most students understand that colons can introduce a list. The SAT and the ACT are really going to focus in on that second rule, and that is when the second clause is expanding on the first. So the answer to number 5 is going to be a colon, and that's going to be answer selection B. He has only one goal, colon, to finish his report on time. For number 6, this is testing semicolons. One day he was here, semicolon, the next day he was gone. So one of the main differences between semicolons and colons is that semicolons can only separate complete sentences, except for when they're separating items in a list that already contains commas. That's a little bit of an exception. But the difference between a colon and a semicolon, notice in number 5, that second clause is not a complete sentence. To finish his report on time, that's not a complete sentence. That's a dependent clause. The first clause is an independent clause, a complete sentence. He has only one goal. But the second clause is not a complete sentence. It's not an independent clause. In number 6, both of those clauses are independent clauses. They can both stand by themselves as complete sentences. So that's one clue that doesn't eliminate the semicolons. For number 5, you could look at that and say, I can't use a semicolon there because the second clause is not a complete sentence. But for 6, they're both an option, but then you have to kind of read in and analyze whether the second clause is expanding on the first clause or whether it's just presenting another related piece of information. And I think the latter is the case here. The first clause, one day he was here. The second clause, the next day he was gone. Those are just related statements. It's not that one is expanding or answering a question posed in the first clause. It's just stating another related topic. And that's important to understand. Writers will use semicolons to indicate relations between the concepts that they're stating. It's important to know, though, that, or to be aware that it's very easy to overuse a semicolon. It should be used to place emphasis where you particularly want the emphasis to be experienced, not just any single place where there could be possibly a relationship between the sentences. Of course, when sentences are ordinated in a paragraph, there should be some type of general organization from the get-go. The semicolon should be used as a special case to place emphasis for the reader. So number 6 is correct as it's stated, no change. One day he was here, semicolon, the next day he was gone. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at 7 and 8. Question 7, I helped me to another plate of spaghetti. Number 8, I asked he and her to pick up butter at the store. So I'll give you 3 minutes. After 1 minute, I'll give you some hints, and then we'll go through a solution. Okay, so before I give you the answers here, I just wanted to go through an explanation of pronouns in general. I have here a chart listing three forms, three pronoun tenses. Technically, reflexive pronouns are object pronouns, but there's also another one. So we have subject pronouns, object pronouns, possessive pronouns, and reflexive pronouns. So subject pronouns, which are in the nominative tense, the nominative form of a pronoun, they do the action of a verb. So I went to the store. You bought a piece of candy. He is going to the movies. Those are all subject pronouns because they're doing the action of the verb. Object pronouns receive the action of the verb. So I, a subject pronoun, took her, an object pronoun, to the store. Her is an object pronoun because she's receiving the action of being taken to the store by me. I have some examples here. So I, you, he, she, we, they. Those are all subject pronouns versus me, you, him, her, us, them. Notice you is the same in both pronoun tenses, so don't be confused by that. That can be a little bit tricky. Subject pronouns, though, in the simplest case, we can divide pronouns into two forms, subject and object. Subjects do the action, objects receive the action. And you is the same in both tenses. Now, possessive pronouns, we'll get to those later. Those just show association or ownership. And there's a specific punctuation that we need to use for that called the apostrophe, and there's a few rules that we'll get into with that in a later video. But here, for number 7 particularly, they are testing reflexive pronouns in number 7. Reflexive pronouns, the myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, or themselves, these pronouns are really overused. A lot of people feel as if they might be perceived as being more intelligent or more sophisticated by using this form of the pronoun, and so it's oftentimes used incorrectly. You should only use a reflexive pronoun when the object and the subject are the same person or the same thing, which is the case for number 7. Notice, I helped me to another plate of spaghetti. That's incorrect because here I'm doing the action of helping and I'm receiving the action of helping because I'm helping myself to another plate of spaghetti. So number 7 is C. It needed to be in the reflexive form. So I helped myself to another plate of spaghetti. Number 8, I asked he and her to pick up butter at the store. Whenever you're combining pronouns with a conjunction, you need to make sure that they're in the same tense because they should always be, or the same form rather, I should say. So here, it should never be the case that you use a subject and then an object on opposite sides of a conjunction. And here you can see that we have a subject pronoun he, and then we have an object pronoun her. So that's absolutely wrong. We need to change it up to make sure that they at least match, and then we need to make sure that they're in the same form and matching. So I asked somebody else. So I here is the subject pronoun. So these are object pronouns receiving the action of me asking. So the object pronoun form of he is going to be him. So I asked him and her, which is answer selection D, to pick up butter at the store. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at 9 and 10. So again, I'll give you 3 minutes. After 1 minute, I'll start to give you some hints. Number 9 is asking the list of books for summer reading. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. My screen just went away. Let me restart that. I'm so sorry, guys. Technology, sometimes it cuts out. It'll be right back. My apologies. Okay, so sorry. So number 9, the list of books for summer reading was released last week. And number 10, while cucumbers are the most common, it isn't the only vegetable that can be pickled. So 3 minutes, and after 1 minute, I'll give you some hints. Okay, so 9 and 10 are really going back to subject-verb agreement, and we need to find the antecedent in number 10 to the pronoun it. The antecedent is a really complicated word that just means the word that some pronoun refers to or is standing for. For number 9, the list of books for summer reading was released last week. So normally, most commonly in English, when you have phrases containing the word of, there is a few exceptions, but most commonly the true subject is going to come before the word of. So notice here, the list of books. The list has many books on it, but it is one list. It's one list made of many books. The same with like bouquet of flowers, deck of cards. Those are singular items. They have more than one word in their name, deck of cards or list of items, but it's one list, it's one deck, it's one bouquet made up of many different smaller items. But overall, we would consider it one item. So the list of items for summer reading was released last week. So we've identified that the subject here is singular, list, so it requires a singular verb. Was is singular, it's in the past tense, so we know it's either was or it's is. It can't be B or D because those would be plural. Now, which should it be? Should it be in the past tense or the present tense? Well, if you look at the word after was, you have released, right? So that's a phrasal verb. Was released is a past tense, so we can't change the word release because it's not bolded and underlined. So we can only change the verb, so we have to change the verb, we have to keep the verb as past tense, so the answer here is A. And for number 10, that pronoun it doesn't agree, the number in that pronoun that it represents doesn't agree with the form of the noun that's present or that it refers to. So in number 10, while cucumbers are the most common, it isn't the only vegetable that can be pickled. So it is a pronoun that is referring back to the noun cucumbers. Cucumbers is plural, so we need to make sure that we use a plural pronoun. So we need they, so we definitely know that it's not D or A. They are not the only vegetable that can be pickled, or they have been the only vegetable that can be pickled. Notice that C changes. C doesn't work because it's counteracting the contrasting introductory word while. While introduces a contrast between ideas, so it's setting up a contrast between the two clauses. So for for letter C, they have been the only vegetable. That's the opposite of what they're trying to say, that they're not the only vegetable. So that logically doesn't make sense, so the answer here is going to be B. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's take a look at 11 and 12. So again, I'll give you 3 minutes, and then after 1 minute, I'll start to give you some hints. 11, while the cucumber is the most common, it isn't the only vegetable that can be pickled. Notice there is a difference. That's not a typo. There is a difference there. And 12, the coach ordered the team the following pieces of equipment, semicolon, cleats, comma, jerseys, comma, and helmets. So 3 minutes, and then I'll go through an explanation. Okay, so for number 11, now we can contrast this with the, I believe it was question number 9 in the last set that we did. Notice now I use the article the and the singular noun cucumber instead of cucumbers, plural. So now, while the cucumber, that's the antecedent of the pronoun it. It refers back to cucumber, which is correct. It is singular. It's a singular pronoun, and cucumber is a singular subject, so it matches up there. So therefore, it is correct as it's listed. So for number 11, the answer was A, no change. For 12, the coach ordered the team the following pieces of equipment. So notice that it's introducing a list. That's the generic rule for a colon. So we need a colon, and then we have a simple series list, an item series. So we have a comma between each item in the list. And so that matches up with answer selection C. The coach ordered the team the following pieces of equipment: colon, cleats, comma, jerseys, comma, and helmets. Just a digression there and a quick kind of ancillary point. The comma that comes before the conjunction and there, so after the word jerseys in number 12, that's called the Oxford comma, and I just want to let you know that in a lot of publications and a lot of fiction writing and writing that's for the general masses, like newspapers and magazines, oftentimes you're not going to see that comma there because it's optional. And as a writer, you have the option not to use that comma as long as it doesn't cause confusion in omitting it. But it's more about, as you'll learn, there are a few grammar rules and punctuation rules that are clad solid that you may not break, but a lot of them are flexible. And it's more a matter of being consistent in your own writing rather than saying that one way is quote-unquote right than wrong. So I just wanted to point that out because you could see examples, especially in literature, that contradict that, and so I don't want you to be confused that that is an area where there's some option for writers. And again, it's just more about being consistent rather than which style is correct. So the answer to 12 was C. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, let's move on to 13 and 14. 13, he and her need to go to the store later this afternoon. 14, while one group of the birds are flying south, the other group hasn't moved at all. So I'll give you 3 minutes. After 1 minute, I'll give you some hints. Okay, so for number 13, he and her need to go to the store later this afternoon. So the pronouns here are doing the action of needing to go. Need to go here is a phrasal verb, so it's more than one word that represents one action item, or one action. He and her, he is in the correct case. That's the nominative case because it's a subject pronoun. Her is an object pronoun. That's incorrect, so it needs to be he and she need to go to the store later this afternoon. Remember that when pronouns are connected by a conjunction, like and or, they need to always be in the same case. So there's never going to be a case where it's an example or scenario where the two pronouns will be opposite cases but combined together with a conjunction. They have to at least be in the same case because they're both doing the action or they're both receiving the action if they're connected by the word and. For number 14, again, remember with phrases containing the word of, the true subject usually comes before the word of. So here it's one group of many birds. That's singular. It's one group still. So we know that it's not A and it's not D. Now we need to know whether we're going to be using the present tense or the past participle tense. And here we want present tense because we have that ing form of flying south. So while one group of birds is flying south, the other group hasn't moved at all. So the answer to 14 would be B. Let's look at 15 and 16. So 15 says, there's a light coming from the top floor, semicolon, however, comma, I can't see any light coming from the basement. 16, although there is a light coming from the top floor, comma, I can't, however, see any light coming from the basement. I'll give you 3 minutes, and after 1 minute, I'll start to give you some hints. Okay, so for 15 and 16, these two questions are really testing punctuating a transition. And there's two different rules that you need to be aware of, two different situations in which transitions can occur. So a transition, like the word here, however, is interrupting the flow of the sentence. It's not merely being used as a contrasting conjunction, it's interrupting the sentence flow. It is contrasting, but it's being used here as a transition. 15, there was a light coming from the top floor. However, I can't see any light coming from the basement. So when a transition occurs within one sentence, within one independent clause, then you're going to punctuate it by surrounding it by commas, because it's really just interrupting the sentence flow. Whenever it's occurring between two complete sentences, however, the correct punctuation is going to be semicolon, transition, comma. So you first need to understand what's going on. Is it separating two sentences, or is it occurring within one sentence? 15, it's occurring between two separate sentences. There is a light coming from the top floor. Period. That could be its own sentence. And remember, to qualify as a complete sentence, we really are just looking for a subject and a verb combination. If it's missing, if a clause is missing either one of those, a subject or a verb, that's clearly an indication that it's not an independent clause. It's not a complete sentence. It's a dependent clause, an incomplete sentence. But for the first clause in 15 is a complete sentence. There's a light coming from the top floor. The second clause, after however, I can't see any light coming from the basement. That is a complete sentence as well. I is the subject and see is the verb, and everything else is the predicate. So we have two complete sentences. So this transition is occurring between two sentences, meaning that we need a semicolon, transition, comma, which is how it's already punctuated. So the answer to number 15 is A, no change. 16, however, there is a little bit of a curious phenomena that's occurring here that I need to point out to you. In English, this can be a little tricky. You can turn a complete sentence into an incomplete sentence by applying some type of modifying word or some type of conditional word. Here, the word although is going to turn that a clause which was an independent clause in number 15 into a dependent clause, because it's setting up a comparison between two clauses, and if you don't have the second clause, then it doesn't make any sense. So there is that kind of counterintuitiveness about it, that you can add a word to a clause and make it dependent. So although there is a light coming from the top floor, that's dependent. So let me go back actually and label this for you with my highlighter. So orange, right here, that's an independent clause, and then this is another independent clause. In 15, the independent clause, I'll put in orange, and then the dependent clause I'll put in blue. So you can see for 15, we have two independent clauses, but for 16, we have a dependent and then an independent. So this is going to occur within, and a dependent can't stand on its own. So it has to be has to be combined with the independent clause, which we're doing here with a comma. So for number 16, we need to just surround the transition with commas. And so that's going to be C. Although there's a light coming from the top floor, comma, I can't, comma, however, comma, see any light coming from the basement. If you have any questions, then please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at 17 and 18. So number 17, if only I was able to run faster, I would have won the race. And 18, my brothers or my sister-in-law are coming to pick me up from the airport. So I'll give you 3 minutes. After 1 minute, I'll give you some hints. Okay, so for number 17, this is a little bit of a trick, a little bit of an exception here. In English, whenever we want to express something that's hypothetical or contrary to fact, we use the subjunctive mood. In other languages, some other languages, they have a whole other verb tense for it. In English, we substitute out plural verbs for what would be a singular situation or scenario. So here, when we say, if only I was able to run faster, well, I'm not able to run faster. It's hypothetical, it's wishful, and so I'm expressing something that is contrary to fact, so I need to use the subjunctive mood. You do that in English by substituting out plural verbs for their singular version. So instead of saying was, which is singular past tense, I'm going to substitute it out for were, which is plural past tense. Now that usually would not make sense. That usually would be incorrect, but because I'm expressing something that's hypothetical, that's not necessarily true, that I wish were true, then I'm using the subjunctive mood. So the answer to 17 is D. If you have any questions about that, then please let me know. For 18, we're combining these subjects using the conjunction or. Remember, with or, and as well as with correlatives, either or and neither nor combinations. With any of those versions, you need to make sure that the verb matches with the most proximate or closest subject. So here, the closest subject is that compound noun, sister-in-law. There's more than one word in that name, sister-in-law, but that's just one person. Okay, that's one sister-in-law. So that's singular, and that's the most proximate subject or most proximate noun to the verb are. So are should not be plural. It should be singular, and then if it's going to match up with the phrase is coming, then that needs to be singular present tense. So that means that we can't use has, we have to use is. So the answer to 18 was B. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, let's look at the next two. 19 asks, she will be attending the Monday meeting, however, she will not be attending on Tuesday. 20, the sun rised over the mountain about an hour before the valley started to warm up. So I'll give you 3 minutes. After 1 minute, I'll give you some hints. Okay, so for 19, she will be attending the Monday meeting, comma, however, comma, she will not be attending on Tuesday. So we have that transitional word, however. We need to investigate whether this is occurring within one sentence or whether it's separating two sentences. Here, she will be attending the Monday meeting. We have a subject, that's she, and then we have a verb, will be attending, the future conditional tense, will be attending the Monday meeting. So we have a subject, we have a verb, everything else is the predicate. So we have a complete sentence in the first clause. That's an independent clause. The second clause, she will not be attending on Tuesday. Same thing. We have a subject, we have a verb. So we have a complete sentence and another independent clause. The second clause is another independent clause. So this is occurring between two sentences. So the correct punctuation is going to be semicolon, transition, comma. And that's answer selection C. Now 20 is a little tricky. It's a tricky word, verb tense question. And so in English we have, there's a few others, but the main two past tense forms that you need to be aware of. You have the simple past tense, and then we have something called the past participle tense. So the past tense has the suffix or the ending letters ed at the end of it to indicate that it's one event that we're describing that happened before the current time period. The past participle, however, has the verb conjugation of the beginning word either has or have or had or have, depending on the form that you're using, singular versus plural, and then whether the event has completed in the past or whether that event occurs, started in the past or and continues to today. So the word has, as it's written there, that means that it started in the past, but it continues to today. Had is it started in the past and it ended in the past, but we use the past participle to compare two different things to each other that occurred in the past. So the past tense, the simple past tense, is just one event in the past. The past participle tense is two events, one occurring before the other, both in the past. So it might be a little bit confusing, but for 20, the sun rised over the mountain about an hour before the valley started to warm up. You need to investigate the logical connections here. The sun has to rise first in order to warm up the valley. And they say that there's a time difference between the two, so it's very clear that one happens before the other. So if that's the case, that's a clear usage of the past participle tense. So we need, and it completed in the past too. It rose over the top of the mountain, and so after it rose over the top, it was done. There's no more mountain to rise over anymore. So the sun had risen over the mountain about an hour before the valley started to warm up. The answer to 20 is B, had risen. Now, if the sun was started to rise in the past and then continued to rise up until present time, that would be has. But here we're talking about it started to rise over the mountain, it completed its rising over the mountain. Now that it has rose over the mountain, it is applying heat to the valley and warming the valley up. So there is a logical connection here that you need to be aware of, and hence the correct choosing the correct verb tense. Okay, we'll do. Let's do one more pair, and that'll bring us up to the end of class today. So let's look at 21 and 22. I appreciate, by the way, before we do that, I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you guys very much. Please share and subscribe with your friends. And if you like my videos, please hit the like button is what I'm trying to say. I've been talking a little too long, apparently. Otherwise, let's give you 3 minutes, and let's look at 21 and 22. After 1 minute, I'll give you some hints and then an explanation, and that'll bring us up to the end of class. Okay, sorry about that. For 21, the freezer's temperature had to drop below 32 degrees before the water in the tray started to turn into ice. So the key for number 21 was really that word started at the end. That indicates, because it's the simple past tense, and this is the result. The freezing of the water is the result of the temperature dropping below 32 degrees. That indicates logically that the first condition had to occur and complete and finish in the past before the second condition, which is the water freezing in the tray, would be able to start or to be able to come to fruition. So what we need here is the past participle, and we don't need it. It's not continuing into the present time. It's stopping. It started in the past, and then it's stopping and finishing in the past. So this is had to drop. It is correct as it's written. B is incorrect because that would mean that it started dropping, the temperature started to drop below 32 in the past and continues up to today, up to present time, dropping below 32 degrees, which wouldn't make sense if they say in the next clause that the result of this process is the water freezing. Okay, so you have to, logically, it wouldn't make sense with has. And 22, Joe told me that he needs the following items at the store: butter, milk, and bread. So this is introducing a list, and so that's the general usage of a colon, and we're not following, we're not preceding, I shouldn't say, preceding the colon with a verb or a preposition. So this is completely fine. Store is a noun, so that's completely appropriate. If you have any questions on anything that we've done today, then please let me know. Otherwise, if you find these videos helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And Dr. Tot, do you want to say goodbye to everybody? Come here, Dr. Tot. You want a cookie? Let's see if he'll come over here. Come on, let's say goodbye to everybody. Come on. Can you say bye? Can you say bye? Hey, bye. Come on. You can do it. You do it all the time. Say bye. Say bye. So I don't really want to say bye, apparently. Here you go. There's a cookie. All right, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.